I'm a greedy slob. It's my hobby. Save me!
Welcome to my happy place. Over the years, my setup has taken on different forms with many CRTs. This Grundig's too big. This PVM's too small. This CRT is just right. It's funny. Each time I make a few tweaks, I say to myself, finally, I'm done. But is one setup ever really complete? While I'd be perfectly happy with any of my past configurations, this could be endgame with dual CRTs. A PVM 20L5, a bit excessive for a dedicated TATE monitor, but it's sharp as hell and perfect for the space. And my newest addition is next level, the BVM D20F1. It's basically the same as the 15kHz only 20F1 minus some service menu options. But what it somewhat lacks in finer horizontal convergence, it makes up with multi-format capabilities. I haven't white balanced either of these BVMs, so it's not an apples to apples comparison, but at 16,000 hours, the D20 is just as sharp as the regular 20F1 with 77,000 hours. Consumer TVs might not have the horizontal resolution of pro monitors, but they have two big advantages: cost and size. If you want a large pro monitor, then you better have deep pockets. Prior to the BVM D20, I treated myself to one of the most vibrant consumer TVs I've seen, a Loewe Profil Plus, and its 68cm Philips tube is more of an ideal size for my setup. I learnt all about Loewe's from my buddy Ludo, and after seeing his, I was sold. I've genuinely never seen Scanlines so sharp on a consumer set. Unfortunately though, time has not been kind to the horizontal deflection circuit. And as I tried to convey in the intro, the warping is awfully distracting in side-scrolling games, and I highly value horizontal linearity in a CRT. So while I go cap hunting, the BVM D20 takes its seat at the throne. Relative to where I sit, a 20-inch CRT is the bare minimum size I'd want to game on. And to ease the downsizing, I moved the TV unit close enough to where my wife hasn't yet noticed. Honey, if you're watching,
I'm sorry.
My PVM 20L5, technically called the D20L5 in Australia, has an early serial number and is affected by the top left warping, allegedly due to a coil in the deflection circuit, as detailed in a Sony bulletin. As the slight distortion is well out of Mario's line of oncoming Goombas, it's never really bothered me. The slight red push is exaggerated on camera, but after 10 minutes of warm-up, it settles to a pearly white. I did pull the neckboard caps out of circuit and they all tested fine, so I'm not too worried. The anti-glare film was removed by the previous owner, and even after I white balanced to 100 nits, I felt it was missing a little bit of oomph, and I shamelessly undid some of the hard work and cranked up the contrast.
Gives it a little kick.
I have the BKM 129X reproduction card as an extra input, with the convenience of direct SCART and VGA. Without a rotated CRT, I used to play vertical shmups with 90-degree software rotation on a Raspberry Pi 4. The Scanlines weren't orientated correctly, but was plenty serviceable. With the PVM in TATE though, vertical shmups fill the entire 19-inch screen and it just looks right. I even removed the rubber feet, not just for clearance next to the curtain, but it looks cleaner and more intentional, like it was meant to be displayed this way. Before I put these two Sonys into action, I installed an exhaust fan into each. Like my previous fan installs, a wire pokes out the back for the variable fan speed switch, powered by USB. The BVM D20 takes the fine-tuning serviceability of the 15kHz 20F1 and the multi-format capabilities of the PVM 20L5, as if they kind of scissored. I've changed the D20's RGB-S output to the 20L5, which self-terminates the signal. I get a similar startup interference that I saw in the BVM 20F1, and it's a telling symptom of likely aging BK board capacitors. Made in 2000, it came with an early firmware 1.03, yet the latest floating around online was version 1.21. I upgraded the BVM 20F1 by flashing the firmware to a fresh IC, removed the old chip, and slotted the new one into the socket. But utilizing the PCMCIA slot, I can flash the firmware with an SRAM card. My buddies hooked me up with everything I needed, so the upgrade cost me nothing. I followed Sony's official bulletin on the Console Mods wiki, but do this at your own risk. If you brick your BVM, then don't come at me, bro. It's on you. So here's the process. Step 1. Grab a PCMCIA card that's at least 512 kilobytes and a card reader. And be prepared to sell a kidney if you don't have one. Step 2. Format the card, either in the BVM or using a PC into file system FAT. But you'll want to test the card in the BVM anyway to see if you get this message. If so, then you'll need to replace the card's internal battery. Make sure the write protect switch is off and rename the volume this. BVM Init.
God save the Queen.
Step 3. Download the firmware. The A and D series firmware is available on archive.org, and F series owners can find theirs on GitHub. Step 4. Unzip. According to Sony, the file needs to match the name of the monitor and firmware version. This file was already in that format, so I simply copied it to the root of the card. Step 5. Insert the card into the BVM, turn off the power from the rear, and back on. If you can't do the old reach around, then soft restart the monitor in the extended menu. A slow flashing standby LED indicates its body is ready, so press the standby button to upgrade, and the LED should blink faster.
It has begun!
The upgrade should take about 5 minutes. My first attempt upgrading didn't go so smooth though, where it was stuck in standby and I thought I bricked the BVM.
Shit.
After taking a few deep breaths, I re-downloaded the firmware, unzip, and tried again. And thank the CRT gods, because now I'm on firmware 1.21. I'm not entirely sure of the changelog, but who can say no to a free upgrade? My BVM belongs to the early batch of D-series monitors that may be prone to CRT and flyback transformer damage in the event the PA board's diode short circuits due to excessive voltage. Sony issued a fix in the form of a daughter board called PA1. I should have done my due diligence and removed the left side panel and checked before picking up the D20. So let's find out together if it's got the factory recommended fix. BVM's fucked! It survived 16,000 hours, so I'll just keep my fingers crossed and hope that it doesn't shit the bed. The D20 can be a real diva with sync, and 240p was all out of whack until I turned on VCR mode. To access the extended menu, try 1111, 53415, or 9999. As the BVM doesn't take separate sync, it needs combining in a C-Sync. But using a passive circuit causes curling at the top left of the screen. The OSSE Pro is integral in my setup as it's my digital to analog converter and downscaler. With the extra AV out add-on, it can output RGBS, but the BVM doesn't agree with its combined sync either. I haven't tried the Pico Sync as I have several Extron RGB interfaces on hand which combine HV sync. And with DDSP on, it outputs a more compliant sync which completely remedies the top left distortion. I've also read that altering the service menu item CLP PDLY can fix the flagging, but not in my case. I'd recommend the service menu fix first though before buying or adding extra equipment to the video chain. The PVM 20L5 is functionally on par with the D20 minus the sync issues, and also lacks the fine geometry adjustments and even finer convergence of the BVM. Unlike my two BVMs, the 20L5's convergence is only configurable by manipulating the purity rings. The 15 kHz BVM 20F1 has horizontal convergence for practically every area of the screen. I'm talking 14 discrete sections for horizontal convergence. And there's almost no excuse for misaligned RGB phosphors. The BVM D20F1, however, has the same vertical convergence options with V-static for entire vertical alignment, as well as separate controls for the top and bottom, but Sony removed those 14 horizontal controls in the multi-format BVM, and only left us with static horizontal convergence. Lucky, mine's fairly uniform in the center. Sony claims that the D20F1 can resolve 900 TV lines, but is it a big difference of the 20L5's 800? While the D20 is sharper, I attribute that to mainly having better convergence. But when I sit back on the couch, there's almost no distinguishable difference. Thankfully, the BVM came with the BKM10R remote, which acts as the monitor stand. It takes the same input cards as the 20F1, so I can carry over my recapped BKM21D for composite and component. The 21D can also take SDI, which isn't typically used in consumer AV gear. I've never used SDI in the setup though, as you need to be more selective on what to display, as 240 and 480p don't conform to the format. Even with a multi-format monitor, I still occasionally downscale to 240p, but I'm more selective on the content as it's mainly to suit the aesthetics. Games like the Xbox 360 Cave Shmups and the regular stuff that you might have seen on the downscaling chronicles still get the 240p treatment. And I stream classic movies, mostly anime, in 480i. For higher than 15 kHz, I was conflicted whether to display the Nintendo Switch in not quite aspect correct 4x3 480p to utilize the entire screen real estate, or to shrink down the 19-inch viewable screen down to 17 3/4 inches for true 16:9 and display in 720p or 1080i. I used the OSSC Pro to pass through 480 and 720p and to downscale 1080p to 1080i with zero lag. 720p and 1080i on a CRT are on another level compared to anything I've seen on an LCD. But in my opinion, image size beats resolution. I've considered going back to a trolley so I can pull the CRT even closer and play HD games in 16:9, but then I remember how inconvenient that was in my last house. So since I care more about a larger viewable image than resolution, I tend to play HD games in 480p and don't often take advantage of 720 and 1080i. Sacrilege when you have a multi-format monitor, I know, but unless I sit closer, it impacts my enjoyment when it's difficult to read text and I can't even appreciate the finer details. Now, you don't need a multi-format Pro monitor to play HD content on a CRT. You can display the same content on an HD or cheap PC CRT. In fact, I'd argue that it might look even better on a PC monitor. I recently picked up this 100Hz Loewe Zelos 5261ZW, which is a Q25B chassis. Ludo Frankenstein this set with a signal board so it can take the VGA card for unprocessed 31 kHz, making it one of a kind. At a viewable 22.5 inches, it's the tiniest 100Hz widescreen CRT that I've come across. The screen is practically the same size as the Sony FW900, if only it could scan to the same high resolutions. It is a consumer TV though, so don't expect crazy sharpness. In fact, you can see the shadow mask as a vertical screen door effect. I love me a widescreen and would have it permanently situated on the long TV unit next to my main CRT, if it didn't obscure the projector screen. Anyway, all this to say that you don't need a multi-format CRT if you have the space for multiple displays. Multi-format monitors are just more convenient, being a Swiss Army knife to handle most of your gaming needs. The reality of owning a BVM D20 almost didn't come about, as I had my sights and my cash set on another multi-format monitor,
The JVC DT-V1710CG!
have several friends with these monitors, and every time I see them in person, I'm riddled with FOMO. And one friend was so generous to lend me his as a try before I buy. 20 inches is already my size threshold, let alone 17, but I wanted to see if I could make it work in the setup. This one only takes RGB and component through the original card, which can even take separate HV sync. Take notes, Sony. And it's got mono audio. It looks approachable from a serviceability standpoint, with plenty of breathing room for the R1 chassis and several daughter boards. I'm dreading the day the PVM 20L5 needs servicing, as typical Sony over-engineering made it a real rat's nest. No wonder it gets hot without the exhaust fan. Whereas most of the boards in the BVM D20F1 are modular, so when I do eventually recap the big K board, it should be a piece of cake to remove and service. Just like the PVM 20L5, the DT-V has no digital convergence options, and H and V stats are adjustable by two separate internal potentiometers. Take a listen to this healthy degauss. Ain't that just beautiful? And that's not the only sound it makes. When in standby mode, it produces a high-pitched chirp about every 5 minutes. The front buttons navigate the OSD and service menu to carry out digital adjustments. To enter the service mode, press menu and down together. Then when you see this symbol, immediately press left and down together, followed by right. It's clocked over 22,000 hours, and prospective buyers better beware, there's a counter reset option. The flat CRT has an anti-glare film which is scuffed and degraded. It's only noticeable when there's a solid color, but it ain't so bad during gameplay. In my opinion, the JVC has better blacks and contrast than both my Sonys, especially my 20L5 without the lightly tinted film. TV lines are the number of black and white lines measured at a width that's equal to the height of the visible screen. Due to the way TV lines are counted, drawing a 16:9 image on a 4:3 CRT reduces the height of the raster and therefore the span of the horizontal lines. So the BVM D20F1's 900 TV lines drops to 700 when in 16:9. And the PVM 20L5's 800 down to 600. Widescreen CRTs, on the other hand, never reduce the height when in 16:9 and therefore do not change TV lines. And the holy grail, the Sony BVM D32, has 1000 TV lines no matter the aspect ratio. JVC states the DT-V to have 800 TV lines, same as the 20L5. I haven't white balanced the JVC, so disregard any differences in color. For 240p content, both look sensational, maybe too sharp for some. Just like the BVM D20, the JVC has its own sync issues. Plugging in the Mr. FPGA by RGB with C-Sync produces top left flagging as well as total screen jiggle. If you own one of these DTVs, I'd say that a sync cleaner is a must. With DDSP on, the 240p jiggles are completely gone as well as the sync flagging, but it shifts the picture to the right. RGB interfaces with HV shifting gets disabled when DDSP is on. So is there any way to keep the HV controls while outputting a more compliant sync? If you have DDSP off, using the RGB interface to output HV sync only half fixes the sync flagging, but the 240p wiggle still remains. So basically, if using an RGB interface, you need DDSP on, but output any type of sync to the JVC. When switching Mr. FPGA cores, it made me a little weary when the JVC would flash a very bright white. That can't be good for longevity. The PVM L5s are known to have funky 480i interlacing, and you'll need to watch this video in 60Hz to better understand what I mean. The JVC, however, interlaces more like a normal TV, so that persistence of vision and phosphor decay tell my brain that I'm seeing an entire frame. With 900 TV lines within 20 inches, the D20's interlacing can be jarring if you're not used to 480i on such a sharp set, especially if displaying PAL 50. It's an acquired taste, but I understand why there's a small crowd of BVM owners who downscale 480i content purely to mitigate the flicker. I can't quite put my finger on it, but the 20L5 never really impressed me with 480p. I mean, it looks completely fine, but compared to a PC CRT, it's a little meh. Subjectively, the JVC beats the 20L5 in 31kHz with better sharpness and vibrancy. I briefly tested mid-resolution 24kHz with the Ultracade UVC's 640x384p splash screen, and there was a loss in vertical hold. For what it's worth, the BVM and 20L5 also couldn't display 24kHz. There's some arcade games that output an oddball vertical frequency, like Mortal Kombat, and all three of these multi-format monitors displayed the 53Hz signal without a hitch. Dragon Ball Z at 55Hz though was more problematic. The PVM 20L5 can't decide if it needs to scan at 50 or 60Hz and keeps changing the vertical height. And the JVC just shows a black screen. The BVM D20 was the only one out of the three that had no trouble with 55Hz. The JVC's visible 16 inches shrinks down to a mere 14 3/4 inches when displaying 16:9. My first playthrough with 720p had horizontal smearing, but it turned out to be my cheap ass DAC. I swapped it out for another and boom, looks fantastic. There's very little separating these three multi-format CRTs, but if I had to order them from great to amazing, the PVM 20L5 is just behind the DT-V, with the BVM D20 looking marginally better. I've gotten to play with the JVC for several months and featured it in the last few downscaling videos. And I think it's an amazing monitor with stupidly sharp 240p, provided it's paired with an Extron RGB interface with DDSP or equivalent. It looks subjectively better than the 20L5 by a very small margin. Then again, there's 3 less inches to resolve the same number of TV lines. While I love the crispy image and multi-format capabilities of the DT-V, it's only a little bigger than my PVM 14L5. If I could pull my TV unit even closer without it being an eyesore, then I would have copped the DT-V. Otherwise, there's not enough for me here that I'm not already getting in my Sonys. No offense, JVC gang. So that's the state of my CRT setup in 2025. For now. Each of the JVC DT-V, the PVM 20L5, and the BVM D20F1 are amazing high-tier monitors, and they all perform very similar to each other, and I can't say that there's one in particular that's head and shoulders above the other. Even though I'm spoiled with luscious scanlines and multi-format capabilities, I do miss gaming on a larger set. And the dual Sony's long-term future hinges on whether I can fix the Loewe's horizontal linearity. Until then, I'll enjoy gaming on one of the sharpest, most versatile monitors ever to exist. The legendary Sony BVM D20F1.
That's not a BVM. This is a BVM. Man, that is so lame. Your lame ass fucking Australian accent. Man, why do you gotta mess everything up, man? You always make everything lame. Like I'm lame. But you are lame. You're the fucking one that's lame. Okay? Get your ass out of here.